Are you like most sales and other professionals who want to grow their wealth faster than what they are currently doing through their company 401k, even with that company match, the stock market, or just plain saving money? Would you sleep better at night if you had the financial freedom to be job optional in just 3 to 5 years through investing in real assets? Maybe you don't want to stop working, but wouldn't it be cool if you could retire a decade earlier than most and do the traveling you and your family have planned for years while you're still young and can enjoy it? Let's face it, most busy professionals don't have the time or desire to take on more work outside of their W-2 to grow their wealth. On The Wealth Flow, each week we share the stories, the investments, and take a deep dive into the various asset classes that can deliver that accelerated growth to your portfolio passively. That's right, no extra work for you. Instead, we'll put your money to work. Learn what the 95% aren't talking about and join the top 5% of earners today on The Wealth Flow.
Welcome to The Wealth Flow. My guest today is Adam Benton. Adam loves working for seniors to help provide a stellar life. He was recognized nationally by Argentum, the leading industry association, and he was recognized with a 40 Under 40 award for leadership. He serves for 3 years on the Utah Alzheimer's Association board to advocate for seniors with dementia, raise awareness of the disease, and fund research. He lives in Salt Lake City, Utah, with his wife and 5 kids, 4 boys and a girl, all redheads, set of identical twins in there as well, and his favorite son with Down syndrome. He completed his bachelor's in finance at Brigham Young University and an MBA with an emphasis in real estate from Columbia University. He spent 5 years in finance on Wall Street and then co-founded Stellar Senior Living in 2011 with his family. Adam, welcome to the show.
All right, Keith. Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be on here. And that 40 Under 40 award, I am now over the hill. I shouldn't even have that on my resume anymore because I couldn't receive the award anymore. But yeah, thanks for that warm intro.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I typically will do, Adam, is I'll start with just really kind of your background, where you grew up, and what eventually led you into real estate and into what you're doing today.
Yeah, you bet. So I was born in Texas. And then I moved around a lot as a kid. I spent a formative amount of years in LA and Los Angeles, and then a couple of years in Atlanta. And then I spent the last couple of years in high school in Utah. My family moved around a lot for my dad's job. He was an attorney, but graduated in Utah and then went to Brigham Young University. And from there, moved on to Wall Street. Basically just did finance there, hustled for like 5 years, right, on Wall Street. It was a great business. In terms of just how I got to where I'm at today, I didn't grow up thinking I'd be in a family business, but Stellar Senior Living, it's a family business. So I've got 2 partners. It's my father and my brother-in-law. And my dad had a lot of experience in this space. He switched from being an attorney to then joining a large operating company that was operating senior living. And in 2012, we decided as a group to start our own senior living business. So he had a lot of knowledge in the space, but wasn't a direct investor in it. I left Wall Street, finished up business school, moved back to Utah from New York City. My brother-in-law moved from California to Utah to basically get this thing launched. And so, yeah, that's the start. I mean, today we're 12 years later, we have almost 3,000 employees. And we've got about, it's a big operation. We've got 34 locations. We're in 9 different states. We've got about 4,000 residents. And our vision is really to, what we say is to impact the lives of 10,000 people by 2030. So that's our goal, really. But a big underpinning of that is real estate to make that happen.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's great. And where in Texas were you born?
So I was born in Houston.
Houston.
Yeah,
All
I
right,
lived
great.
there. Yeah, yeah. I'm the youngest of four, and my every one of my parents lived there for almost 20 years. So all my siblings were all born there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. My sister and my brother-in-law live there now. And we're up in San Antonio. So just figured I'd
Oh yeah.
ask. Yeah. Well, tell me a little bit about that. So your dad was already in the industry, and from a timing standpoint, right now is just an incredible time to be in this industry. With they call it the silver tsunami, but the baby boomers that are getting old, and as we talked a little bit about right before the show started, I'm in the death care business. Obviously, that's kind of. They see you before they see us, but
Yeah.
and it is rewarding getting a chance to meet with and work with seniors. They have such great life experience, and but what about it has is this just something that your dad, because he was in the industry, you guys saw this as a viable business option, and then kind of expanded it on there? Or tell me a little bit about what you think about the industry.
Yeah, it was a major decision. There were two big factors before joining. Well, one is just entering a family business. There's a lot to think about before you decide to go into business with your brother-in-law and your dad. And that wasn't part of my life plan. It wasn't really, I was on a different plan to just continue to grow my career in New York City, right? And so that's one. But the industry itself was actually really attracted me to it. Is it's just very people focused and service oriented. Very different than what I was doing on Wall Street, right? So something that actually had an easy and obvious purpose to it. So started it in 2000, really started looking for properties in 2011. Cold calling people trying to find something, and ended up finding 4 properties. We didn't have the capital to purchase these properties. So what we did is we went to one of my father's contacts, which is a large real estate investment trust, public, and just said, look, we have these 4, they're under contract. Would you guys buy them? So we'll sign the purchase to you, and then we'll just lease them back from you. And in doing that, just for easy math, let's just say these 4 properties were making $1 million a year in income. Our lease was about $1 million a year. So it was basically just a break-even proposition. And you could charge a little management fee to start paying for some things like G&A overhead and some office expenses. So that's what got us started. And then the idea with those was, hey, if we can turn these around, you can really keep every dollar beyond that original $1 million lease payment. So for the first about 18 to 24 months was just walking into our Regis office center and trying to figure out how to find an additional $1,000 here or there and just improve. Just continuous improvement, line by line. That initial purchase with the assignment to the REIT and then leased back to us created the cash flow that we needed to continue growing the business today. So that was an initial start. But to answer your original question, it's such a fulfilling industry in general, from just the types of people you get to work with. Very, very people-centered business. Residents and employees.
Okay. And so your initial purchase with the 4 properties was an acquisition. Is that pretty well how you guys have grown to what you have today? Is through acquisition of existing properties, or have you developed any from the ground up?
Yeah, we have a multivitamin approach now. So we've got some that we've developed from the ground up, some that we've converted, some that we buy and take over operations. What at the very beginning, when we bought those first 4, it was a lease structure, right? We haven't done any leases since then. It was a great way to get in the business if you don't have any capital. But as you continue to grow, we wanted to have more control over the properties and be able to go from there. And so among the 34, there's a mix of stuff that we own outright on our own. There's stuff that we still have the leases. We still have those 4 leases. And then there's stuff where we've joint ventured with other institutions. These are not easy properties to purchase. They a minimum it might be $20 million, and then sort of average is maybe $30 to $40 million to buy a property. So if you think about a $40 million purchase price and you're going to put 30% down, you're going to need about a $12 million equity check. And, we've been growing about 3 or 4 properties a year, and you could quickly see how we just don't have $50 million in the bank every year to just buy properties and then put debt on it to purchase all this. So what we tend to do is partner either with larger institutions that will put in 90% of that capital, and then we put in the 10% required on the $12 million, or we do a friends and family raise. So that's another way in which we'll raise money. The other thing that we did that I wouldn't recommend is we started immediately with the management company. If you wanted to get into owning, for example, senior living, you could invest in senior living without actually doing the day-to-day management, but we just jumped in. So we bought them and immediately started managing them on day one. So the problem with that is that you get a call and say, hey, do you have a policy for this? And okay, well, what does it look like? If I Googled it, what would I Google? Give me 30 minutes and I'll send this policy back to you. So there was a lot of that going on at the beginning. If I would have done it over again, I probably would have hired a different third-party manager to manage it for us, and then watched how they did it for a while and sort of learned along the way. We just ended up doing it, which ended up working out fine, but it was a real hair on fire experience for a couple of years.
Yeah, I'm sure. That's interesting. And so tell me, I guess, a little bit about like a typical, I'm sure they vary, but typical facility. How many beds are there, and what are some of the amenities that the folks living there have available to them?
Yeah. So it's our investment block. We could walk through. There's a wide range of opportunities here. And maybe to start at the 60,000 foot level, you have the industry. If you think about it, you have your house on one end and a hospital on the other. And in between, there's just different gradations of services that you can continue to offer. A retirement community, 55 plus, kind of age restricted, and then something where you're adding activities and meals to it, and then something where you might add additional stuff like care and transportation. So you go from age restricted to independent living to assisted living. That's where you've got that kind of core rent, utilities, and then you start adding on activities, food, transportation, and care. And then you get into memory care, which is more like a secure unit that does that, then skilled nursing, then a hospital. So there's this nice, just gradual shift of additional things that you can provide. We currently operate in the independent living, assisted living, and memory care arena, which is everything from just, you're always going to have, it's like room and board. So rent, food, utilities, and then activities, transportation. That's independent living. And then you add additional care and other types of things to add assisted living and memory care. Those are predominantly paid privately. So if somebody comes out of their pocket to pay to move in, and occasionally you will get government funds for those, but we predominantly focus in that area. The types of sizes of these properties can vary quite a bit. You can have them as small as like a group home. I think everybody's probably known somebody that's bought a house that's got 6 bedrooms and flipped it into something where it cares for seniors.
Right.
That's a group home. There's a specific market for that. And then you start getting at about 16 units, you have to get an assisted living license. So something where you're regulated and you have to sort of go through regular surveys. And that there's a bunch of gradients there. We have people that will buy stuff in the 30, 50, 60 bed range. Our sweet spot is actually more like 120, 130 beds, so 130 units. And it can go up as high. There are campuses that have 1,000 units on it. But I would say that the average type of property is this 130 unit assisted living that people are familiar with. You tend to see them in your communities that you can drive by. There's a reason for that. They have the scale to be able to provide the services economically, but with good quality. So at that point, when you're that large, you can have a team of about 100 people that are servicing the residents. And that's when you start getting below about 100 units, you have to start requiring people to wear multiple hats. Like, hey, you're going to be the executive director, but also the person running sales, and maybe you drive the bus occasionally. Whereas once you get to that 120, you got a team of about 6 leadership that are really doing various aspects of the business, and they're doing it very well. So that's our sweet spot, is about 120, 130 units in predominantly like a population of at least 100,000 people.
Okay.
Is what we look for.
Okay. That makes sense. So with you mentioned that as far as paying, these are privately paid. So these are individuals that are actually paying for the service themselves. In most of the cases, not quite as much of the government stuff that your team focuses on. Okay.
Right. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, there are. So the service within assisted living, it's Medicaid. So Medicaid is the government provided service, but there are income thresholds to be put onto Medicaid. So, but you can use Medicaid government assistance to live in assisted living. We predominantly focus on private pay versions of that. So, but there's a healthy market for owning and operating Medicaid related properties within assisted living as well. And it's a great business.
Yeah. And really the people that are looking to use Medicaid have to exhaust their income before they qualify, right? So it's not, you can't do that in addition to, and again, kind of just coming from our business, we we sit down with a lot of folks and do spend downs to help them plan their funeral arrangements. And sometimes that's in order for them to qualify. So. Yeah.
And so you're familiar with that. And what I found is that we early on, with about 10 years ago, we did buy a Medicaid, kind of 85% Medicaid property. And we actually just sold it recently. So we operated it for about 9 years. What we found is that it just took a different focus. It's a very different model than the private pay version, for a number of reasons. You're not getting paid as much, so you have to figure out how to use like universal workers to be caregivers, but then also maybe then during lunch go serve in the dining room. So things to try to make it all fit. So if anybody's listening to this podcast and is trying to figure out how to get in, a big factor is considering is this private pay or Medicaid, and then picking a lane and sticking with it. You can have just as much impact on both, but managing them is very different to do.
Yeah, for sure. I've been in enough of them that, the government assistance ones, the ones that mainly focus on that. I mean, it's a different feel altogether when you go in there. Quite honestly, it's a different smell altogether when you go in there. I know that's not, that's crazy, but it's true. So.
Yeah, it definitely is. It's getting better. The industry as a whole is getting better. I think if anybody who's not familiar with senior living at all, they just think kind of dark, small hallways. Maybe there's a smell there, some urine or something. You'd be shocked at the types of properties that are getting built now. It's like comparing a cruise ship that was built in 1995 to one that's coming off the yard today. They are different galaxies in terms of differences, and so. For example, we just had one open this year in Denver area that was a brand new build in Broomfield. And then we have another one opening in a month in Spokane that we built. And those ones are, it's like multiple dining venues. The interior design is completely on point. Anybody who walks into that says, I would love to live here. And that's a real different from the stigma of what it's been in the 80s and 90s.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's the same in our industry as well. Funeral homes have changed completely compared to what they used to be. And, it's more of a celebration now of life and, rooms that address that. So that's neat. That's cool that the industry's going there. On your employees that you have, obviously having some nurses on staff, that kind of thing. But are they like 1099 employees, or they work just with your facilities, or how does that work at most of your locations?
Yeah. So every one of our employees is a W-2 employee. So they are our employees.
Okay.
And we have a wide range of employee types of jobs. Imagine we're covering almost every aspect of somebody's life. So you kind of have to have a team that can do that. One way I like to think about this is, and since I'll get into some details because this is a cash flow real estate related podcast. You've got, if you look at the income statement of like an assisted living property, you're going to see one income statement that looks like a lot like what you'd see in multifamily, right? And so it's like rent, expenses, right? Some mortgage, some utilities, maintenance. So that's there. Then you'll see like stuff that looks like a home health type of personal care business where you've got caregivers. So that's RNs and LPNs and med techs and CNAs, everything related to the care aspect of the business. And you'll see revenue for care and expenses related to care, nursing supplies, stuff like that. And then there's a third business in there, which is like running a Chili's restaurant. So that third one is just, right, it's just food. And you're going to have a full team of a chef, sous chef, dishwashers, cooks, servers, everything related to providing a meal. And so when you jam that all together, multifamily, personal private duty caregiving business, and a Chili's restaurant, you have effectively running a senior living operation. So we have housekeepers, drivers, activities directors, salespeople. You have typically an accountant type of business office manager on site that's just managing all of this, an executive director over the top, and then you have a full staff around just care. And so you have to know a little bit about a lot. None of this is rocket science, like none of it. You can understand everything pretty quickly, but logistically, there's just a lot going on that you got to be able to get your arms around to make it all work.
Yeah, for sure.
Still not rocket science, but it does take a little effort. It's a daily grind.
Yeah. What have been some of the changes as far as what's available on? You mentioned, I guess before we go there, you mentioned having. So is it a separate? Are they paying? They're paying for their lodging. Then they are they paying separate for any meals, or do you have meal plans, or what does that look like?
Yeah, typically it's all inclusive. So when the unique benefits of senior living is that they really focus around it working for a senior. So a few things. One is, let's say rent is $5,000 a month. Mm-hmm. Within that rent, you will get your room and board. You'll get all the food taken care of, utilities, all the utilities, and then any sort of cable. Typically, internet is included in that base rent. The activities are included, and transportation around either with a shuttle bus or a private car. That's all included just in that base rent. And then there's a second fee that's usually around care that's specific to your needs. And it's meant to change using a nursing assessment based on where you're at and what you'd need. And if you think about assisted living, it's a little different than skilled nursing. So skilled nursing, it's going to be medical related needs, right? Like IVs, feeding tubes, trachea, just stuff that's nursing related. Assisted living is really, think of it as personal care needs. It's assistance with grooming, assistance with getting your clothes on, maybe some escorting assistance down the hallway, but you're not doing these heavy type of medical related needs. So a lot of times people just need some simple help in the morning or in the evening. And just some basic concepts around personal needs. And that's truly what we're offering. And then you might have an additional help related to managing your medications. Like I got sick a couple weeks ago. I had to get put on it was strep throat. So I put on an antibiotic. It's a 10-day antibiotic. And like remembering to take that one medication twice a day is just on my own as a 40-year-old. Like I still couldn't keep it all straight. And so usually you have about 10 to 12 medications when you're in your mid 80s, and there's a lot of complexity there. We can help with that as well. So those are the kinds of services. It's usually all comes in one bill, but separated out between that one thing, which is rent, all inclusive of that stuff, and then care on top of that. And that's what you get. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's, as I've kind of become a little bit familiar with them, and I'm certainly by no means an expert on them. But one of the things that I found just shocking is the expense of exactly how much that stuff cost. which is kind of scary because both my mom and dad are kind of getting up there a little bit. But yeah, you look at a lot of people, and now the medium price house is pretty high, but you mentioned $5,000, for example. I mean, a lot of these folks, when they bought their house, it was maybe 150, 250. And now all of a sudden, they're having to take on a new mortgage for something that's quite expensive. How do I guess people are just, are they, as far as funding it, I guess they're just kind of going through their retirement to do it. Is that really what's?
Yeah, I'm happy to walk through that. So the math is actually really interesting because it's and that's a common concept is, man, this is expensive. And you hear that a lot, like, oh yeah, senior living, that's the expensive solution. The truth is actually fairly different. It's this is a middle market product. So this is typically people that were teachers or the police chief locally, some blue collar workers. It's you have a spread, but this is not actually for the wealthy. If you're really wealthy, you're going to live in your own mansion and bring in your own personal caregivers. Like that's the truth of it. When we look at places to build, we actually carve out anybody. We look at net worth and income above the age of 75. And we carve out anybody that's making up too much money or too little money. And there's a real sweet spot there. The reason why it looks so expensive is because we're taking bills that might be across 12 or 15 different categories and grouping it into one. So you're not doing any shopping at the store anymore. You're not paying for rent anymore. You're not paying for utilities. All of a sudden, when you do that math and compare it to your house, you realize that it's actually a better deal. And so the reason why assisted living has continued to grow and grow and grow is because of that math. It's just people, our average age is 86 years old, and it's 75% women, and it's typically widows. So about 10% are couples that will come in, but most of the time it's women. And oftentimes they've been a widow for a while in their own home. And so usually there's some sort of thing that spurs it to move in. So I had a fall, or I have an issue where I had a surgery, need to go into assisted living and need some additional help, or I just can't really get around my house anymore. And when we sit down with everybody and just do the math, you find out that we're actually lowering their monthly expenses instead of increasing it, at the same time moving up their quality of life. And so oftentimes they're just in social isolation. And in this scenario, when they move in, they realize, man, I actually am, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, I sit down and eat with peers, and I get to look forward to that activity in the afternoon. And it's just taking care of me for me in a meal that's signed off by a dietitian. Whereas maybe when you're cooking your meals at home, you're opening up a can of SpaghettiOs or something. It literally is night and day difference in terms of quality of life. And then the cost comes down. In terms of how you actually pay for it, oftentimes we see there's about 3 buckets. So one is, by the time you're moving into assisted living, you're probably going to sell your house. So there's going to be equity built up in your house that you're going to sell. The second thing is that you have Social Security, right? So you have a monthly payment of probably $1,500 to $2,500 a month that's coming in, Social Security. And then you're going to have savings and a pension. So something where you have some investments and savings that are just feeding that amount of money. So, I mean, we'll just keep with the $5,000 number. It's probably average for the country right now. You, between selling your house, the Social Security, any sort of savings, you end up, and then the fact that you typically are reducing your cost when you move in, people actually tend to do pretty well. The average length of stay for us is about 2.5 years. So at $5,000 a month or $60,000 a year, you're looking at under $200,000 total to stay. So you think about all that together. Okay, there's on the outside you go, man, that's a sticker shock price tag. And then when you get closer to it, going, okay, yeah, that's the reason why this industry is growing.
Yeah, for sure.
As a whole.
No, that makes total sense. And you mentioned that you have memory care. Are most of these on the same campus, and there's just like sections. I've seen them that way, where maybe one building is for more active seniors, and then going to the other side or the other extreme where it's assisted living. Is that how it typically is?
Yeah. So originally, so assisted living is actually a little bit newer than skilled nursing. It's probably been around 40 years, right? And there's been a lot of innovation. And at the beginning, the very first assisted livings looked in two ways. They either looked like a skilled nursing that was turned into assisted living. So it's hallways with just small units, and they're kind of fanning out this way. With a central core, so you could easily watch and manage everybody looking at a nurse call system, right? To the other option is taking an old apartment complex and turning it into assisted living. Both of those options, they were still separating people, independent people from assisted, from people that needed more care. As time has gone on, the trend today is what's called aging in place. So most of the time, what happens is you want to build a property where people don't have to move as much and have this stigma that, oh, you have an additional issue, so therefore you're moving to the other side, right? You're moving, to the other wing. And so now what you do is you just come meet people. They can move in, and they might be completely independent. And 2 years later, they might need a certain level of care. They don't have to move for that. And that's a big deal. And it's the current trend in the industry.
Yeah. No, it makes total sense. That's good that it's moving in that direction. One of the things I've always been impressed with is all the different, activities and stuff that the folks have for them. We personally have hosted various happy hours, which was a little interesting, just to see that they've got a happy hour. Right. Worked with another where we had kind of grief counseling that met there at that location, and of course they were willing to host people from the outside. Because they may be potential residents in the future, right? But anyway, can you tell us maybe a little bit about some of the various activities and stuff that are planned for these folks?
Yeah, keeping with the cruise analogy, if you've ever taken a cruise and you feel like there's just this constant agenda of activities, it's pretty similar. We want to make sure that there is a really nice array of variety of activities that people can do that hit different buckets, right? Social needs or emotional needs or spiritual needs even, and then just active needs. And we'll have a nice mix, and we'll try to switch it up. So we usually have a chocked full monthly calendar of just different activities that you can go throughout the day. And then we try to do our best to bring in the outside community in. So activities where you can have your family or friends join you, or anybody from just from the school or the community around you to participate in that. And it's pretty fun. When people think about senior living, they're not really thinking about what I think is the number one value, which is the activities and socialization involved. And we saw what happened during COVID when people were forced to either stay in their rooms or not be able to move in, and what impact that had with the social isolation that they were experiencing in the senior population, and how important that connection was. And so these activities are honestly the backbone. The two things that are really the backbone of what we do are offering a solid set of activities for socialization, and then offering phenomenal food. And those two things really help everything coalesces around that to make a healthy, fun, lively community that people want to live in.
Yeah. It makes sense. And really the community piece of it, makes total sense. Even if you if you have somebody that has the option to stay in their home, sometimes that alone is kind of isolating, especially when, maybe they're not able to drive. They have to wait for somebody to come by. Maybe they have, a caregiver that comes in, but yeah, that can, if that's the only person you're communicating with and, socializing with, that can be isolating.
Yeah. Even if my grandmother, she lived literally half a mile from one of our better properties, right? One of our best properties in the whole portfolio. and she's 90 and she wants to stay at home. Widowed, been there 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And we own this property. We're operating it. We're just down the road. But one of her daughters was just phenomenal. She'd come and visit her for a couple hours, like every day. That still leaves 22 hours of the day where you're trying to figure out what to do. And typically you're just by yourself. Ultimately, she just had some issues and ended up moving in. And she said, I should have done this a long time ago.
Yeah.
This is my own grandmother, So I've seen it on a personal level. It's, you have this kind of approach avoidance, but, and oftentimes it's the kids that are making the decision. We typically say it's the oldest daughter that's really making the decision here, but about 80% of the time that's the case. And occasionally if somebody's really planning for it and thoughtful, they'll be the ones who are thinking about where to move into. But, more times than not, people are saying I should have done this sooner. It's just all of a sudden you see people that you knew in high school and stuff that were, if you grew up in the same neighborhood and you're getting way better meals than you used to. And then you get to watch a movie later on that night with your friends. And then that you're taken care of. You go to sleep, you wake up, you can press this little button and somebody can answer and say, hey kid, can I help with anything? So it's stuff that at home, you're just kind of figuring out on your own. And it just gets difficult. And there's a couple interesting large trends that are happening, right? So one is that you mentioned, that you alluded to at the very beginning of this podcast. So one is just that baby boomers are aging, right? And so there's this huge, taking a Python kind of concept where they're just moving through. They are just starting this year. They're just starting to hit our assisted living. The second thing, which is I didn't totally anticipate, is that people are just living longer, like a ton longer. This week on the Wall Street Journal, you have Charlie Munger dying at 99, right? And then it was Henry Kissinger died at 100, right? This is becoming normal. But and you pick any one of our properties, I will introduce you to 5 people that are over 100 years old. So that is just growing. And then the third one that's a real growth for our industry is that we track the percentage of people above a certain age that are using our product. That percentage, that utilization rate, is expanding, and by quite a bit. And that's actually the largest driver of the 3, surprisingly enough. So you have baby boomers aging, people living longer, but this expansion of utilization of people that are getting more comfortable with the product and that understand it a little better. 10, 15 years ago, you might have 7% of the population above 75 using assisted living. Today, nationally, it's 13.5. In places where it's been around longer, like Seattle, it's more like 20%. So we continually see that percentage growing. There's a number of factors along the lines of understanding the product, like I mentioned, but also even things that you wouldn't anticipate, like divorce rates going up among kids and adults, is creating less opportunities for your kids to take care of you. There's also just like a more social acceptance of saying, hey, mom doesn't actually have to move into our basement. There's a better solution here. And these kind of cultural changes are all driving more usage of senior living as a whole. It's just and we're at the very beginning of probably a 20-year cycle. Yeah, here.
Just with the baby boomers alone. Yeah. I mean, it's going to continue to go up, and gosh, what a great time to be in the business. So, well, let's maybe talk a little bit about your portfolio and where geographically you're located.
Yeah, you bet. So we're based out of Salt Lake City. We have a corporate office here with about 50 people. And then we've got we're in 9 different states. And so we have, we want to make sure that we have a few criteria in place. One is that we want to be able to fly directly to that location and back on a commercial flight in the same day. That means that we're not going to ever really invest or own anything in Florida, right? It's going to be places that are like, we have a big presence in Denver, Phoenix, Tucson area. So kind of go in that direction, Seattle, Boise. So we want to be able to just zip in and out. So of those 9 states, they're all in the Pacific Northwest and the Rocky Mountain region, following the I-25 and the I-15, basically up and down. So we're what are considered as a super regional when it comes to operating senior living properties. So we've got a large regional presence in the industry. And then we don't like to be like, oh, it's in Wenatchee, so it's like a flight to Spokane and a 2-hour drive. We're not going to do that. It's just a flight to Spokane and maybe a 30-minute drive to Coeur d'Alene, but we're not going to end up doing like the whole in and out has to be same day if we need to. That's for emergencies, as well as just quality of life and just continuity of care. All of that kind of plays into making sure that we can keep a tight portfolio around what we do.
Yeah, no, that's smart to plan it that way. My wife and I bought a short-term rental here last year in December. And that was one of those things I didn't necessarily, I wanted it to be far enough away that I had to put systems in place, but the flight deal was there's no good way to get there, you know? So it's like, I'm either going to have to go to Atlanta and then top from Atlanta to Asheville. It's crazy. So I could understand trying to plan, especially from a business standpoint. Adam, who is in your corporate office is having to go from, where you are or your family, who's actually visiting these locations and taking these flights?
Yeah. So last year, I just got these numbers. We spent $1 million in travel, right? So as a company, so we got a lot of people flying in and out all over the place all the time. And it's a mix of our directors of operations that go and they might manage a portfolio of 8 to 12 locations.
Okay.
To our, head of nursing. Nursing, we have some traveling nurses that do a lot of travel. And then whenever we're hired to buy or take over a property, there's a lot of travel around just getting that up and going operationally. But I agree with you when it comes to systems. There's what we find is that the properties that are out of state, you just have to be forced to build better systems, and the teams there have to be more reliant on their own. So if there's an emergency, they're not going to call you to fix it. It's like, hey, we hired you to do that. You got your whole team there. We've got good systems to support you, and we'll continually improve our process. The properties where we can drive to, that's 20 minutes down the road or an hour one way, those guys are constantly driving us to calling us to drive down and fix a light bulb type of thing. So it's there's something to be said about having a little bit of distance on the buffer for what you operate,
for sure,
to sort of force you to delegate better. And I couldn't agree more with that. So that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, for sure. What about some of the ones that you have done acquisition on? What are the most common inefficiencies or things that I can pull this lever right away and I'm going to be able to improve? I guess you're also used to and can compare your balance sheet to theirs and see where they're paying a lot for this or whatever. But what are some of the big ones that you see as?
So you're right. We've got a ton of data. So when we're hired to we're not hired, we buy stuff, but we also third party manage. So a portion of our portfolio will manage just for a different owner. And we have a ton of data now where we can compare, hey, this ratio doesn't look right or that doesn't look right. But, we own some multifamily. What I find the big difference is there are 100 levers you can pull in senior living to get things straight. So, you come in and go, your overtime is looking a little too high, or you really need two on that shift when you could do it with one, or the food cost per day per resident is $1 higher than what we would expect. All of those things add up. But I would say there are some big levers just right off the bat. Oftentimes we're hired because the occupancy isn't what it should be. And that is the number one lever. It's not like, and in this industry, you can't just drop rate and it moves up occupancy. That's equivalent of like saying like, hey, our hospital isn't getting enough patients, so we're going to just run a special here and we'll get more patients. Like people are gonna be like, there's something wrong with that place. I'm not, I'm looking for a place to live, but I'm also looking for somebody that's competent at what they're doing. Like there's a big operating component to it. So because of that, unlike other places where you could keep an apartment complex full just by dropping rate, you really can't do that in this industry. You have to come in and make some significant changes around the operations, mainly team, reputation, that sort of stuff to get occupancy moving up in the right direction. And that is a grind. That takes a while. It's what we're good at, but it is, there is no easy solution there. But it's typically the number one lever you pull is getting occupancy up. And it's a multivitamin approach to getting that done. Once you do that, then there's other, just the next biggest expense is payroll. So it's just really diving in. Yeah, I mentioned you got about 100 people. You're running a 24-hour business. And so you're going to have 3 shifts basically throughout the day, 8-hour shifts that are just filling in that 24 hours. And so you're going to have maybe 20 to 30 people on each shift. There is a lot of efficiencies that you can work out through just processing that properly. So yeah, they're all the items that I would think.
Yeah, for sure.
Did you just?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, go ahead. You saw balloons go by.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Great. Happy birthday or whatever.
Thanks.
And what about from a sales standpoint? Obviously, because oftentimes when I tell folks that we're in the death care industry, and that I have a sales team, it's like, whoa, what are you talking about? There is an ability to be able to get out there and talk with folks, and I'm sure it's the same in your industry. But how are you coming across those folks to be able to increase that occupancy that you talked about?
So at each one of our locations, we have 2 salespeople. We call them family advisors. Mm-hmm. And it's because the sales process actually takes a while. There's usually a lot of decision makers. Like I mentioned, it's the oldest daughter who's usually touring with her mom or dad to trying to find a place to live. They typically tour 3 to 5 locations and then choose one. And then from there, our average sales cycle is 45, 50 days. So when somebody's touring, so that means that people take 6 months, they take a long time. And usually you're trying to find the right fit for care. You're trying to find the right fit for pricing. There's a timing component to it. And then the biggest one is just there's a lot of times multiple decision makers in this. So the sale is really consultative. So that's why we have our salespeople called family advisors, because of that just consultative long nature and complexity around it. And we want to make sure that they're landing at the right spot. So most of the time we come in and really focus on being a very good guide to this process that you might only do once in your life. So we want to make sure that it's done right. Again, it's less of like a pushy salesy thing, as more of just being a competent advisor. Yeah. Which is very different.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah. It makes total sense. Well, cool. Anything else, Adam, that we should know about this industry, or that maybe I didn't ask questions on that you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, I hope this came across. If you're ever looking at investing in senior living, there are a number of ways in which you can participate, either by just investing as an LP investor, or buying stocks in the industry, or just watching it. Sometimes at first glance, it comes across as incredibly complex, and there's a lot of moving parts, and it sort of shies people away from it. I'd encourage you to just, you can get up to speed fairly quickly, and there's a lot of ways in which you can participate that don't require the day-to-day sort of focus that I'm involved with. And I'm also happy to, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's just Adam Benton at Stellar Senior Living. Happy to talk to you through it if you're looking at something. I've taken a handful of those over the years, and happy to do that. So,
oh, that's cool. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. And then if somebody did want to invest with you, do they reach out to you with through LinkedIn, or what's the best way for them to connect with you?
Yeah, you bet. So we do maybe once every year, we might do a raise directly.
Okay.
And so you can go to our website. It's stellarliving.com. There is an investment page, and you can just drop in your information there, and you'll start receiving information. We are not like an investment mill of senior living properties. We typically co-invest with large institutions, and occasionally the stars align where we can do a specific raise with individuals. We love that. And so just go on our website, Stellar Senior Living. It's actually Stellar Living or Stellar Senior Living investment portal. Drop in your information, and you'll start getting deals.
Yeah. Fantastic. All right. And when you're not doing the senior living stuff, and not with the kids, and what is it that you like to do?
I think you've just filled out all my time there.
Yeah,
It's
that's right.
it's running the business, it's family, it's a big portion of what I do, and there's a little bit left over for me. I live in Utah, love to go skiing,
Yeah.
but in general, it's this is keeping me pretty busy.
Yeah, I imagine. All right. Well, I've got two more questions for you, Adam, if you have just another minute or so. And
you bet.
One of them would just be a book recommendation. Anything you've read recently. It doesn't necessarily have to be real estate related, but just a book that was impactful for you that you like.
Yeah. So I love Audible. I do about 40 books a year.
Mm-hmm.
This latest Elon Musk book blew my mind. I thought it was just an incredible journey of his. That he's such an eccentric character, but there is a business model that you can pull out of what he's doing. I don't agree with all of his tactics, but I took that away. It was very inspiring. Okay, this is a guy that's just time and time again taken huge risks, launched businesses that are just kind of throw a big vision out there. So I liked it because we're doing something on a smaller scale that felt very similar, where we have a vision. We want to impact the lives of 10,000 people. And so you have a lot of people join our organization trying to do that. And so then it's just, well, how do you get that done? And you just have to be willing to be just consistent about it. And then also just change plays consistently if you don't have it quite right, and then build a phenomenal team around you. I just felt like in reading his book or his biography about it, is that time and time again, you saw where he had to do that with his first mapping, his like website business, and then PayPal. And then he went and launched SpaceX and Solar City and Tesla. And then he just took over Twitter. It's kind of the same recipe every time. And there's something to be said about the success of that recipe. It's not easy, but it is successful if you do it right.
Yeah.
So that's my book recommendation.
That's great. I hadn't got that recommendation yet, and I'll definitely check it out myself. Last question that I have for you, Adam, is just if you were to give some advice to somebody that's maybe just starting out in their investment journey, what advice would that be?
If you're starting out in your investment journey, I love the saying, hey, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Okay.
I personally just like to learn by doing. You can get a lot of just analysis paralysis. I would just say, hey, jump into it, but make sure that you don't overexpose yourself, and just you don't have to be too greedy about it, but you'll learn way more by just doing it, right? Just get in and do it. Do the research, and then drop in some money into something. And then you'll be amazed at how focused you'll be on it once you actually have an investment in there, because you're sort of forced to at that point.
Yeah.
And that's, but don't overdo it. That's what I would say.
Yeah. No, I think that's great advice. All right. Yeah. Well, we will call it a show. Thank you so much, Adam. Appreciate you being on The Wealth Flow.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks.
Being that you're still here, I trust you found value in this episode. I personally wish I would have known these guests and strategies when I started my wealth creation journey. Go to wealthflow.capital to subscribe to our newsletter. And as a free gift, we will send you our quarterly market report and the top 10 things to look for in an investment opportunity. Take a minute to give our show a rating and review. Help us reach 1 million professionals by subscribing and sharing this episode with someone you know who could also find value in it.